How to trust in God's love when everything seems to be falling apart. When everything begins to collapse, something inside you shatters too. You try to hold it together, to stay strong, but no matter how tight your grip, life keeps slipping through your fingers. You tell yourself to have faith, but faith feels distant now, like a language you used to speak but have forgotten. You pray, yet the silence that follows feels heavier than words. The walls you once leaned on are gone, the plans you trusted have fallen apart, and even your reflection looks different in the mirror. You wonder how much more you can lose before you disappear completely. But what if this collapse isn't your undoing? What if what you call falling apart is actually the gentle breaking open of something sacred? What if God's love isn't absent in the wreckage, but hidden within it, reshaping you through what was never meant to last? Because sometimes the end of what you built is the beginning of what can never be destroyed. There comes a time when life stops making sense. You wake up and realize that everything that once felt certain is gone. The prayers that used to bring peace now feel empty, and the things that once anchored you no longer fit who you are becoming. You try to return to what was familiar, but it no longer feels like home. The truth is, you're standing in the middle of something sacred disguised as disaster. The breaking isn't evidence that God has left you. It's proof that He's drawing you deeper, stripping away what you've outgrown so that you can finally see what was real all along. The human heart loves stability. It clings to what feels safe even when that safety becomes a prison. You think control will protect you, but it's actually what keeps you small. You want answers, but God offers transformation. You want comfort, but He offers truth. It's never easy when life begins to unravel because you've been taught to fear uncertainty. Yet uncertainty is the soil where trust takes root. When you're surrounded by pieces that no longer fit, it's natural to want to rebuild quickly. You want the pain to end, the confusion to stop. But God's love doesn't rush. It moves slowly, precisely, intentionally. It knows the value of undoing before rebuilding. The breaking isn't chaos, it's craftsmanship. The same hands that shaped the stars are now shaping you, removing what cannot stay, even when you beg for it to remain. You can't see it now, but this dismantling is an act of mercy. Every ending you fear is making space for something truer to rise. The disappointment that feels unbearable is the doorway to alignment. What looks like failure is the beginning of freedom. Because when God allows what you trusted to fall apart, it's never to destroy you. It's to reveal what your strength was never meant to carry. One day, you'll look back and see how what broke you actually built you. You'll remember the nights you thought you wouldn't survive and realize that love was there the whole time. Silent, steady, faithful. It wasn't the absence of God that hurt, it was the removal of everything that kept you from seeing Him clearly. And in that clarity, in that stripped-down stillness, you'll find peace that no storm can take away. There's a moment when the illusion of control begins to crumble. It doesn't happen all at once. It begins quietly, when plans you were certain of start to unravel, when people you counted on suddenly drift away, when what you built with your own hands collapses beneath the weight of its own fragility. You stand there, helpless, watching as life no longer bends to your will, and you realize that no amount of effort can hold back what was never truly yours to control. This is where the soul begins to tremble. The human heart was not made for chaos, and yet, it's in chaos that you discover how much you've been clinging to illusions. You thought that if you prayed enough, worked enough, stayed good enough, things would always make sense. But God's love is not a formula. It's not bound by logic or fairness. It moves in mysterious ways because it is eternal. It sees beyond what you can comprehend. When you lose control, your first instinct is to fight for it. You tighten your grip. You push harder. You bargain with heaven, pleading for things to go back to the way they were. But love refuses to lead you backward. It gently dismantles your false security, not to leave you empty, but to set you free from the weight of self-reliance. Because control, no matter how comforting it feels, is the greatest enemy of trust. To trust in God's love means to stand in the middle of uncertainty and believe that even what hurts is working for your good. It means allowing what is leaving to leave, even when your heart screams to hold on. The same God who allows the breaking is the one who promises to rebuild. But rebuilding takes surrender, and surrender is not weakness, it is worship. It's the moment you stop asking why and start whispering, "I'm yours." Sometimes you won't understand the purpose behind the loss until much later. You'll question the timing, the pain, the silence. You'll think you're being punished when you're actually being positioned. God's love does not always protect you from the storm. It often walks you through it so you can learn how to stand in the rain without fear. Every collapse reveals what cannot be shaken. When everything else falls away, what remains is what was real all along. That's the strange mercy of divine disruption. It strips away everything temporary so that your soul can finally rest in what is eternal. You may not see it now, but this letting go is a sacred process. You are not losing control. You are being released from the illusion of it. One day you will thank God for the doors that closed, for the plans that failed, for the things that slipped away. You will see how He removed the weight that was keeping you from peace. For now, trust that what feels like chaos is actually divine order rearranging your life into alignment. Nothing has gone wrong. You are exactly where love needs you to be, on holy ground disguised as uncertainty, learning that surrender is the truest form of strength. There is a silence that enters your life after the storm begins, and at first it feels unbearable. You reach out for answers, but heaven seems mute. You pray with every ounce of strength left in you, yet no response comes. Days turn into weeks, and the quiet stretches longer than you ever imagined. It's in this emptiness that fear begins to whisper the cruelest lies, that God has forgotten you, that your prayers have vanished into the void, that maybe, just maybe, you've been left to figure it all out alone. But silence is not the absence of God's love. It is the language He speaks when words would only confuse you. The human heart wants clarity. The divine heart offers transformation. In the silence, He is not ignoring you. He is inviting you. The answers you want are not missing, they are maturing. What you call delay is often divine timing preparing what your faith has asked for. In the quiet, everything hidden in you begins to surface. The fears you've buried, the wounds you've ignored, the questions you've silenced, they all rise like echoes demanding to be heard. It's uncomfortable. It's raw. But that's where God's love begins its deepest work, not in your strength, but in your surrender. When the noise dies down, when you finally stop striving, that's when love can rebuild from the ground up. The silence is a mirror. It reflects back what still needs healing. It shows you how much of your faith depended on immediate reassurance. It exposes the fragile places where trust was conditional. And though it feels like loneliness, this is actually holy ground. The stillness you fear is where peace is born. The quiet that feels empty is where wisdom begins to take shape. The silence is not punishment, it is purification. Sometimes God hides not because He's far away, but because He's too close for you to recognize. His presence overwhelms the senses, so He withdraws just enough for you to seek Him not with your eyes, but with your heart. You want an answer. He wants your attention. You crave a sign. He craves your surrender. And when you finally stop chasing noise, you discover that He was never gone. He was in the quiet all along, waiting for your stillness to meet His. The greatest transformations happen in the waiting rooms of heaven. When it seems like nothing is happening, everything is. The silence is not stillness, it's preparation. The pause is not neglect, it's mercy. Because if God gave you everything you asked for before you were ready, the very blessing would break you. He waits not to withhold but to protect. So instead of fearing the silence, learn to rest in it. Sit inside it like a sacred space and listen, not for noise but for peace. Because peace is His voice, and it's speaking now, softer than breath, stronger than despair. Trust that the quiet is not the end of the conversation. It's the beginning of a deeper one. And when he finally speaks, it won't just answer your questions. It will heal the part of you that needed to ask them. When everything falls apart, the natural instinct is to fix it, to rebuild the walls, gather the pieces, and return to what once felt familiar. But God's love doesn't rebuild the way human hands do. It doesn't restore by returning you to the past. It renews by creating something entirely new. What's breaking in your life isn't a mistake. It's the removal of what cannot carry you forward. The things you are losing are not punishments. They are pruning. You are being refined, not ruined. There is a hidden work unfolding beneath the surface of your pain. You can't see it yet, but every unanswered prayer, every delay, every disappointment is a brick in the foundation of something eternal. What feels like destruction is preparation. God never wastes pain. He uses it as the raw material for transformation. The soil that feels heavy with loss is the same ground where new life will one day bloom. The hardest part of trusting in love's process is accepting that it rarely looks like progress. You expect miracles to come in flashes of light, in dramatic reversals, in visible signs, but the greatest miracles often begin in darkness, in silence, in the slow rebuilding of a heart that has finally stopped fighting what is being undone. The work God is doing in you cannot be rushed, because He's not repairing the surface. He's remaking the foundation. There's a reason why everything feels uncertain right now. You are standing between what was and what will be, and that in-between space feels like nothingness. You don't recognize who you are becoming because you're still shedding who you used to be. God doesn't ask you to understand this stage, He asks you to trust it. Transformation isn't always visible. It's felt. The ache, the confusion, the emptiness, all of it is sacred movement. Sometimes love has to take away what you wanted to give you what you need. You prayed for peace, so He removed the things that kept you anxious. You asked for clarity, so He took away the distractions you kept clinging to. You asked for strength, so He allowed the ground to shake beneath you, teaching you that strength isn't built in stability, it's built in surrender. Everything He removes is mercy, even if it feels like loss. This is the hidden work of love. It's slow, deliberate, and often invisible. It happens in quiet mornings when you wake up still hurting but choose to hope anyway. It happens in the small decisions, to forgive, to breathe, to keep believing even when the evidence says you shouldn't. It happens in the tears you cry when no one sees, and in the peace that arrives without explanation. God is not rebuilding your life to what it was. He's building you into what you were always meant to become. So trust the process even when it feels hollow. You're not being buried under the weight of endings, you're being planted in the soil of beginnings. And just like the seed that must break to sprout, you too are being split open, not for destruction, but for growth. Love is working where you cannot see, rewriting your story from the roots up. One day, you'll look back and realize that every collapse was construction, every silence was preparation, and every loss was love doing its deepest work. Pain has a way of reshaping everything you believe about life, faith, and love. It arrives uninvited, breaking through the doors you thought were locked, scattering the plans you worked so hard to build. You question why it came, what it wants, and how long it intends to stay. Pain strips away pretense. It forces you to face what comfort allowed you to ignore. Yet what you perceive as destruction is often the delicate hand of God's love, sculpting something you couldn't create on your own. At first you resist, you bargain with heaven, you ask for the pain to stop, you tell yourself that you've learned enough, that this lesson isn't necessary. But love doesn't wound to destroy, it wounds to heal. The breaking isn't cruelty, it's precision. Every crack, every tear, every sleepless night is cutting away what was never meant to define you. You are not being punished, you are being purified. The truth is that transformation doesn't happen in the light of ease, it happens in the dark of endurance. You cannot grow roots on mountaintops. Roots grow in the soil of struggle, watered by tears, strengthened by time. What's painful right now, is the evidence that you are alive, that something inside you refuses to give up. God doesn't waste your suffering. He repurposes it. Every wound becomes a place where grace can enter. The breaking also humbles you. It silences the pride that once said, "I can handle this on my own." Pain brings you to your knees, and in that surrender you finally see clearly. You realize that strength was never about holding everything together. It was about trusting the one who holds you. When everything else fails, love remains. And in that realization, you begin to breathe differently. You stop fighting for control and start allowing peace to take its place. There are days when you will question the point of it all. You'll feel like you're going in circles, revisiting the same fears, repeating the same prayers. But healing is not a straight line. It's a rhythm of breaking and mending, of falling and being lifted. Each time you fall apart, a little more of your resistance dissolves and a little more of love takes root. You're not going backward. You're being refined through repetition. Each moment of pain chisels away another layer of illusion until what remains is real. When you look at your life through the eyes of fear, pain seems cruel. But when you look through the eyes of faith, pain becomes holy. It's the fire that burns away the false and reveals the eternal. It's the storm that tears down the walls so the light can reach what's hidden. You don't need to understand why it hurts. You only need to trust that nothing is wasted, not the tears, not the waiting, not even the silence. There will come a day when you look back and realize that pain was the doorway. It led you out of self-reliance and into surrender. It led you out of fear and into trust. It led you out of despair and into the arms of love. You'll see that every scar became a symbol of survival. Every wound became wisdom, and every loss became a revelation. Pain did not destroy you. It delivered you. And though you may never wish for it again, you'll thank God for what it made you become. Because when pain finishes its work, it leaves behind something unshakable. It leaves behind a faith that doesn't depend on circumstance, a peace that doesn't crumble with loss, and a love that mirrors the heart of God, steady, enduring, eternal. Fear is the shadow that follows pain. It creeps in after the breaking, whispering questions that drain your courage. What if things never get better? What if I'm not strong enough? What if I never heal? These thoughts circle your mind until trust feels distant and unreachable. Yet even here, even in the valley of fear, God's love remains. Silent sometimes, but unshakably present. It does not rush to prove itself. It waits for your heart to quiet enough to feel it again. Fear feeds on the need for control. It convinces you that safety can only be found in certainty. It tells you that if you don't have the answers, you're lost. But love operates differently. It doesn't remove uncertainty. It teaches you to walk through it. Trust isn't born in knowing how everything will turn out. It's born in choosing to keep moving when you don't. When you say, "I don't understand, but I believe," something in you grows stronger than fear itself. There is a sacred power in admitting your weakness. Faith doesn't deny fear, it transcends it. God doesn't ask you to be fearless. He asks you to let His love be greater than your fear. When you tremble, He holds you. When you hesitate, He waits. When you break down, He builds you again. Trust is not a feeling that suddenly appears. It's a decision that matures with every act of surrender. The world teaches you to fight your fear by pretending it doesn't exist. But love teaches you to bring it into the light. The moment you stop hiding your fear from God, it loses its hold. You tell Him everything, the doubt, the panic, the exhaustion, and He meets you there not with condemnation, but with compassion. He doesn't rebuke your trembling. He blesses it. Because trembling means you're still standing. It means the storm hasn't won. Sometimes the greatest expression of faith is not shouting promises, but whispering them through tears. You may think your voice is too small to matter, but heaven hears every word. The quiet prayer you speak in fear carries the same power as the boldest declaration of faith. God doesn't measure the volume of your belief. He measures the depth of your dependence. One day you'll understand that fear was never the enemy. It was the invitation. Each time you felt afraid but chose to trust anyway, you opened another door for love to enter. Each time you faced what terrified you and refused to give up, you became stronger. The courage you're looking for isn't the absence of fear. It's the presence of faith that stands in its shadow. So breathe. The same love that guided you through pain will guide you through fear. The walls around you are not closing in. They're being rearranged into shelter. What looks like the edge of your strength is actually the threshold of grace. Keep walking. Keep trusting. Because every step you take through fear is a step deeper into freedom, and every moment you choose love over control, heaven applauds in silence, knowing that trust has won again. Waiting is one of the hardest lessons love ever teaches. You pray, you hope, you believe, and still, nothing moves. The silence stretches into days, the days into months, and you start to wonder if heaven has forgotten your name. You replay every word, every promise, searching for meaning in what feels like delay. But what if the waiting isn't punishment? What if it's protection? What if God is preparing something so complete, so precise, that giving it too soon would only break it? We live in a world addicted to immediacy. You're taught that faith should always lead to fast results, that trust should yield instant peace. But divine timing doesn't operate like that. Love moves at a pace that protects what it creates. The waiting is not wasted. It's the refining ground where faith matures and roots deepen. It's where your desires are purified, your strength tested, your heart reshaped to receive what's meant for you. God never withholds. He cultivates. He delays only to deliver what will last. The longer you wait, the louder fear becomes. It tells you that nothing is changing, that God has forgotten, that maybe your prayers are too small to matter. But every moment of waiting is a sacred exchange. Your impatience for His wisdom, your timeline for His eternity. In the unseen, He is aligning hearts, places, and moments that will one day meet perfectly. You don't see the movement, but the pieces are already shifting. Trust does not mean you understand. It means you stay open in the dark, believing that love is still working when you cannot see it. There's beauty in stillness, though it often feels like pain. You learn to release the obsession with outcomes and rest in the process. You start to realize that God's timing is not meant to frustrate you but to free you. You no longer beg for what's next. You begin to thank Him for what is. Waiting transforms you. It breaks the habit of rushing, heals the need to control, and teaches the sacred art of peace without closure. In the waiting, love becomes intimate. You stop talking to God as if He's distant and start listening as if He's within. You begin to notice how He speaks through ordinary things. The sunrise that reminds you to begin again. The breath that proves you're still sustained. The gentle strength that returns in the quiet hours when you thought you had none left. This is where trust stops being a word and becomes a way of living. When the time finally comes, it won't arrive with chaos or struggle. It will unfold with ease. You'll realize the delay wasn't denial. It was design. God was never withholding what you asked for. He was shaping you to carry it. You will step into what you once begged for, and it will feel natural, peaceful, right, because it will be ready, and so will you. So if you are waiting now, don't rush the process. Let it do its work. The stillness you dread is the cocoon of your transformation. You're not forgotten. You're being formed. One day, when the pieces fit together and the prayers are answered in ways you didn't expect, you'll whisper, "Thank you for making me wait." And you'll mean it with your whole heart. There comes a time when trust stops being a comforting word and becomes a battlefield. You wake up each day torn between faith and frustration, hope and exhaustion. You tell yourself that you believe, yet deep down, you're not sure anymore. Everything around you seems to be collapsing, and the quiet voice that once felt close now feels far away. But this is the exact moment when God's love is doing its most powerful work, when belief costs you something. Real trust begins where understanding ends. It's easy to believe when life is gentle, when prayers are answered quickly and everything flows as expected. But when you face the unknown, when your prayers return in silence, and when your plans dissolve without explanation, that's when trust reveals its true depth. Because trust is not built in comfort. It's built in confusion. It's forged in the dark, not the light. You may feel as if God is asking too much of you right now. You may look around and see only fragments of what used to be, wondering why everything had to fall apart. But love is not trying to take something from you, it's trying to teach you how to see differently. It's guiding you to a faith that doesn't depend on outcomes, to a peace that isn't shaped by circumstance. Because what's breaking is not your life, it's your illusion of control. Every season of confusion hides a deeper purpose. You're not being punished, you're being prepared. Every unanswered prayer is protecting you from something you can't yet see. Every detour is aligning you with something greater than what you planned. The delay is not divine distance, it's divine precision. And though your heart may not understand it yet, one day it will. This is what it means to walk by faith, not by sight, to move even when you can't see the path ahead, to breathe even when the air feels heavy, to love even when the outcome is uncertain. God doesn't promise that the road will be easy. He promises that you'll never walk it alone. And sometimes the greatest miracle is not when He changes your situation, it's when He changes you in the middle of it. You'll notice that with each small act of trust, your heart softens. The anxiety that once ruled your nights begins to lose its grip. You start to see beauty again, not because your circumstances changed, but because your perspective did. This is how love rewires the soul. Quietly, patiently, one surrendered moment at a time. Trust in its truest form is a kind of peace that defies logic. It's the ability to say, even if I don't know what's next, I know who holds me. It's not the end of fear, but the beginning of freedom. When you reach this point, you realize that trusting God is not about pretending everything's fine. It's about believing you're still held when nothing is. So if your faith feels fragile, don't be ashamed. Even fragile faith is still faith. Even a trembling prayer is still a prayer. And God's love is not limited by your strength. It flows best through your weakness. What looks like the end of trust is often just the place where real trust begins. There's a quiet turning point that arrives after the breaking, after the fear, after the waiting. It doesn't announce itself with a miracle or a flash of light. It comes in silence, almost unnoticed. One morning, you wake up and realize that something has shifted inside you. The pain is still there, but it no longer defines you. The uncertainty remains, but it no longer terrifies you. Somewhere in the middle of everything that felt impossible, you have learned how to trust again. This is the hidden victory of God's love. It rebuilds you from the inside out. Not in sudden bursts of revelation, but in small, sacred moments of resilience. You find yourself breathing more deeply, not because your problems have disappeared, but because your heart has stopped fighting them. You start to see beauty again in ordinary things. The warmth of sunlight through the window, the rhythm of rain against the glass, the sound of your own steady breath. These are signs that peace is returning, softly, patiently, like dawn after a long night. It's in this quiet stage of healing that love reveals its true nature. It doesn't erase what you've been through, it redeems it. Every scar becomes a story of grace. Every wound becomes a place where compassion now lives. You begin to understand that strength was never about being untouched by pain. It was about allowing love to transform the pain into wisdom. You survived not because you were unbreakable, but because you were held through every breaking. The same circumstances that once felt like punishment now look like preparation. You see how the loss taught you empathy, how the waiting taught you patience, how the silence taught you to listen. You realize that everything that hurt you also healed you in some way. God's love didn't take away the storm. It taught you how to stand inside it without losing yourself. The human mind wants closure, but the divine heart wants transformation. So instead of asking, "Why did this happen to me?" you start asking, "What is this teaching me?" That question shifts everything. It moves you from victimhood to vision, from despair to depth. You stop seeing your story as one of suffering and start seeing it as one of becoming. You also begin to notice how your presence feels different. You speak slower, you love deeper, you listen more. The noise inside you has quieted, replaced by a calm that others can feel when they're near you. Without realizing it, your pain has become a light, a living testimony that even when everything falls apart, God's love still restores. This peace doesn't make you immune to future storms, but it changes the way you move through them. You no longer panic when things shake. You remember that not everything that falls is meant to be lost. You no longer fear endings. You recognize them as beginnings disguised in unfamiliar form. You've stopped asking for a life without breaking and started asking for a heart strong enough to keep loving through it. And that's when you finally understand what trust really means. It's not believing that everything will work out perfectly. It's knowing that even if it doesn't, you will still be whole. Because your wholeness was never in the outcome. It was always in the one who carried you through. At some point in your journey, you stop asking God to change the situation and begin asking Him to change you within it. That's when everything begins to make sense. Not in your mind, but in your soul. The storms don't stop, but their power over you fades. You no longer see every challenge as an attack. You begin to see them as invitations. Invitations to grow, to release, to trust. It's not that the pain disappears, it's that it finally has a purpose. This is where the beauty of God's love unfolds most clearly. It doesn't remove your humanity, it redeems it. Love takes your weaknesses and turns them into wisdom. It takes your uncertainty and turns it into faith. It takes the chaos and quietly rearranges it into peace. What you once called failure now feels like direction. What you thought was abandonment now feels like intimacy. What once shattered your confidence now strengthens your clarity. You begin to notice how much lighter you feel when you stop fighting what you cannot control. The weight that used to suffocate you lifts when you stop trying to carry what was never yours to hold. You start to trust not because you see results, but because you feel guided. The evidence of love becomes internal. It's the calm that no longer depends on circumstance. It's the quiet knowing that even if everything changes, you are still safe within His hands. The truth is, God's love was never meant to make life easy. It was meant to make you eternal. The things you lost were never the source of your peace. They were only the scaffolding for something deeper. Once they fell away, what remained was unshakable. The pain revealed the foundation, love itself. And this love, this divine constancy, cannot be taken, cannot be broken, cannot be silenced. Now you start to see your journey differently. You see the places where you resisted and realize that even there you were being guided. You see the moments when you thought God was silent and realize He was speaking in another language, the language of process. The detours, the delays, the disappointments, they were never diversions. They were direction. You were not moving away from your purpose. You were being led toward it, one surrender at a time. You realize now that trust isn't about ignoring reality. It's about believing in a reality greater than what you see. You can walk through loss and still feel whole. You can face uncertainty and still feel grounded. You can be surrounded by darkness and still carry light. That's the mystery of divine transformation. It doesn't take you out of life's storms. It teaches you how to dance in the rain without fear. And once you've lived this truth, you can never go back. You stop praying for comfort and start praying for courage. You stop asking for clarity and start asking for closeness. You no longer need proof that love exists. You are living proof yourself. Because when everything fell apart and you thought you were finished, you discovered something immortal, the unbreakable peace of being loved by God. There's a sacred quiet that comes after the storm, not the silence of emptiness, but the stillness of understanding. You look back at the wreckage that once terrified you, and suddenly it doesn't hold the same power. You realize that you didn't just survive, you were transformed. The pain that once consumed you now feels like a distant echo, and in its place there is peace, not the fragile kind that depends on perfect circumstances, but the kind that breathes in the middle of imperfection. This peace is what God's love always intended to give you. It's not the absence of struggle, but the presence of meaning within it. You've been led through seasons of breaking so that your faith could mature beyond emotion. What used to shake you no longer does, not because you've hardened, but because you've anchored yourself in something eternal. You now know that trust is not about everything going right. It's about believing that even when everything goes wrong, you are still held, still loved, still safe. You begin to recognize that love was never far away. It was woven through every moment of your journey. It was there in the people who stayed when you fell apart. It was in the strength that came when you thought you had none left. It was in the quiet nights when tears were your only prayer. Every heartbeat, every breath, every sunrise whispered, "You're not alone." And now, as you stand in the calm after the storm, you finally believe it. The past no longer feels like a chain. It feels like a teacher. Every disappointment became a lesson in resilience. Every unanswered prayer became a doorway to something deeper. Every fall became a step in the slow dance of becoming who you were meant to be. You see now that nothing was wasted. Even your mistakes were recycled into wisdom. Even your losses became gifts wrapped in disguise. The divine doesn't erase your story. It rewrites its meaning. And the more you trust this love, the freer you become. You stop fearing change because you know that what's real can never be lost. You stop chasing certainty because you've learned that peace lives in surrender. You stop defining yourself by what broke you because you've discovered that wholeness was never about perfection. It was about connection. You've come to understand that trust in God's love is not a destination, but a rhythm. Some days it feels effortless, other days it feels like holding your breath. But no matter how fragile your faith may seem, love keeps finding its way in. It never stops, it never runs out, and it never lets go. So you lift your eyes, no longer searching for proof but giving thanks for presence. You no longer ask, "Why me?" You whisper, "Thank you." Because you see now that even in the ruins, there was purpose. Even in the silence, there was guidance. Even in the breaking, there was blessing. And this peace, this strength, this unshakable trust, it wasn't built by understanding everything. It was built by learning to love anyway. There comes a moment when you finally understand that the journey was never about finding answers. It was about becoming one. Every moment of uncertainty, every unanswered prayer, every night you spent asking why, all of it was shaping something inside you that could never be taught by comfort. What you thought was falling apart was really falling into alignment. You were not being destroyed. You were being defined. This is what the power of God's love truly means. It doesn't promise a life without storms, but it promises that the storm will never have the final word. Love walks with you through every shadow and teaches you how to see differently. You start to realize that the things you once called obstacles were actually bridges. The pain that humbled you made you more compassionate. The loss that broke you made you more human. And the silence that once frightened you became the voice of peace itself. You begin to see how every season of your life fits perfectly, even the ones that didn't make sense at the time. The moments of delay protected you. The endings that hurt you redirected you. The people who left you freed you. Everything that once felt like a curse has turned into a lesson that glows quietly with grace. That's how love works. It transforms even the ashes into light. And in this awareness, something shifts. You no longer chase certainty. You rest in surrender. You stop trying to force outcomes because you trust that whatever unfolds is already held in divine hands. You realize that God's love was never something to earn. It was something to remember. You've always been surrounded by it, sustained by it, shaped by it. Even when you doubted, even when you resisted, even when you felt unworthy, love never left. Now, when you look at your reflection, you see someone different. The same eyes, the same hands. But the soul behind them carries a peace that no loss can steal. You're not who you were before the breaking. You're softer, wiser, stronger. You've learned how to live with open hands, no longer clinging to what must go, but welcoming whatever love brings next. You've learned that surrender isn't giving up. It's letting go of what was never meant to stay. This is where the story turns from pain to purpose. You understand now that God's love didn't come to fix your life. It came to fill it. To remind you that even when everything falls apart, you are never beyond repair. That beauty can rise from brokenness. That hope can live in the same space as grief. That peace can dwell where questions remain unanswered. And as you stand here, no longer lost, no longer afraid, you finally see what trust really means. It's not about knowing the plan. It's about knowing the heart behind it. You may not see every step ahead, but you know who walks beside you. You may not understand the path, but you've learned to love the presence. And in that, you've found something the world can't take away. The calm certainty that no matter what happens next, you are already home in His love. There's a stillness that follows revelation, the kind that doesn't shout, but settles quietly into your bones. You no longer feel the need to explain your journey or prove your faith or question your worth. You simply breathe. You've walked through fire and learned it could not consume you. You've stood in the storm and discovered that peace is not the absence of wind. It's the calm that holds steady within it. You now know that God's love was never something outside of you trying to reach in. It was the light within you trying to break free. Looking back, you see how every broken piece was guided by an invisible hand. The days that felt wasted were not wasted at all. They were preparation. The people who walked away were not rejection. They were release. Every delay was divine timing disguised as disappointment. You didn't lose control. You were freed from the illusion of it. What once felt like ruin now feels like renewal. What once felt like death now feels like resurrection. You start to understand the rhythm of divine love, how it breaks before it builds, humbles before it heals, silences before it speaks. It's a love that doesn't promise ease, but always promises meaning. It's not the kind of love that shields you from pain. It's the kind that transforms the pain into purpose. That's why when everything fell apart, you didn't end. You began. The breaking was the birthplace of your becoming. You carry yourself differently now. You move with grace where you once rushed with fear. You listen more than you speak. You love without needing guarantees. You walk through life aware that peace is not something you chase. It's something you carry. You no longer pray to be spared from trials. You pray for the strength to walk through them with faith intact and heart unclosed. That is the quiet confidence that only divine love can give. And when you face new storms, because they will come, you'll face them differently. You won't beg for escape. You'll ask for endurance. You won't question if you're loved. You'll rest knowing you always are. You'll recognize that every fall is still part of the climb, and every ending still holds a seed of beginning. The world may call it brokenness, but heaven calls it blooming. That's how you learn to trust in God's love when everything falls apart, by realizing it never really did. The things that collapsed were never meant to hold you. The things that left were never meant to stay. The only thing that remained through it all was love, steady, eternal, and stronger than every storm. So you lift your head, not in pride, but in peace. You smile, not because everything is perfect, but because you no longer need it to be. You are no longer lost, you are led. No longer afraid, you are held. No longer broken, you are becoming whole. And as you walk forward, you carry the greatest truth of all. that when everything seems to fall apart, God's love is not just enough. It's everything. As it says in Isaiah 43:2, "When you pass through the waters, I will be with you. And when you pass through the rivers, they will not sweep over you. When you walk through the fire, you will not be burned. The flames will not set you ablaze." You were never meant to walk through this life untouched by storms, but you were always meant to walk through them unbroken. The waters that once frightened you have become mirrors, reflecting the truth of who you are: loved, chosen, guided, and protected. The fire that once threatened to destroy you has revealed the light that was hidden inside. So today, let this be your quiet declaration, that no matter what shakes, no matter what falls, no matter what leaves, you will not lose the one thing that truly sustains you: the love of God. It will meet you in the ashes, lift you from the ruins, and whisper to your soul that even here, even now, all is being made new. You are not standing in what ended. You are standing in what begins. And love, the same love that carried you this far, will carry you home.